Robert Fuller, the legendary star of Wagon Train and Laram, won over Western fans with his rugged good looks and unforgettable performances. But off-screen, his life has been full of interesting turns, from his rise in Hollywood to the mysteries surrounding his abandoned house. What happened to the actor after his time in the spotlight? Where does he live now? How much is he worth? What role does his longtime wife play in the story? Join us as we reveal the untold details of Robert Fuller's life. What do we know about Robert Fuller? Robert Fuller was born on July 29, 1933, in Troy, New York, as Leonard Leroy Lee. He was the only child of dance teacher Elizabeth Betty Lee and Naval Academy officer Robert Simpson Sr. When he was a child, Betty married Simpson Sr., and the family moved to Key West, Florida. This is when young Leonard, who was known as Buddy, took the name Robert Simpson Jr. His parents owned and ran a business in Key West. Robert Jr. learned to dance well at his father's dance school. During the day, his mother taught ballet to local kids, and in the evenings, she and Robert Asar taught ballroom dancing to Navy personnel stationed in Key West. Robert was never interested in school, and he freely admitted that he wasn't a good student. He dropped out when he was 14, and by 1950, when he was 16, his family had moved to Hollywood. His stepfather, a very talented dancer, took on the stage name Robert Cole and she worked in some of Hollywood's biggest musicals for almost 40 years, including Oklahoma Jailhouse Rock and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Interestingly, a young Robert Fuller also had a small role as a dancer in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. While his stepfather was successful in the dance world, Robert Jr. mostly worked as a stuntman and did other odd jobs around Hollywood. Friends told him he could make more money as a union member, so he did. He changed his name to Robert Fuller and started getting extra roles in movies like Above and Beyond, The Harder They Fall, and The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit in 1952. On the advice of his stepfather, he started auditioning for dance roles and was cast in movies with Hollywood's biggest stars, like I Love Melvin with Debbie Reynolds, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes with Marilyn Monroe, and Latin Lovers with Lana Turner. In 1953, he was drafted into the U.S. Army, which put an end to his budding acting career. Robert was sent to Korea and did a great job there, earning the Outstanding Soldier on Guard Mount Award 3 times. When he came back in 1955, he thought about giving up acting, but his stepfather and close friend Chuck Courtney persuaded him to take acting classes first. Those classes led him to train with the legendary Sanford Meisner, whose students included Gregory Peck, John Voight, and Grace Kelly. In 1956, Robert got his first speaking role in the movie Friendly Persuasion. Over the next few years, he got a few more small parts, but his big break came when he played the bad guy in Teenage Thunder. The next year, he played the lead in the sci-fi movie The Brain from Planet Arouse. The next year, Robert was cast in the Western series Samaran City, which was his big break. His work on Samaran City and a few other projects started getting noticed in Hollywood, and soon he was offered a part in a new Western show called Laram. At first, the producers wanted him for the part. After reading the script, Robert really wanted to play Jess Harper, but when he said so, he was told the part had already been cast. Unwilling to give in, he turned down the offer to play Slim and left the executive's office. But fate had other plans. The next day, his agent called with shocking news. The studio had decided to replace the original Jess Harper, and the role was now his. Interestingly, the actor who was fired was John Smith, who then took over the role. Fans of the show later agreed that the switch to John Smith as Slim Sherman was a blessing in disguise because it meant that the roles were perfect for both actors. Laram was a hit. It aired from 1959 to 1963 and took viewers into the rough world of Laram, Wyoming. The show followed the lives of Slim Sherman, John Smith, and Jess Harper, Robert Fuller, 2 men trying to run a successful ranch while dealing with the dangers and challenges of the Old West. Fuller's performance as Jess Harper quickly became one of the show's best parts, solidifying his reputation as a former gunslinger turned ranch hand. Jess was a complicated character. She was tough and fearless, but she also had a lot of feelings and inner conflict. Fuller's natural charisma and ability to bring nuance to the role made Jess a fan favorite. One of the best things about Laram was the chemistry between Fuller and his co-star John Smith. Their relationship on screen as ranch partners felt real, creating a strong sense of brotherhood that resonated with viewers. They stood firm in their belief in justice and faced everything from outlaws and cattle rustlers to the everyday problems of life on the frontier. What made Laram stand out from other westerns of its time was its compelling story, well-developed characters, and high production quality. The show wasn't just about shootouts and cowboy action. It also looked at themes of loyalty, honor, and how hard it is to keep law and order in a land that isn't always lawful. With its strong writing and memorable performances, Laram left a lasting impression on the Western genre, and a lot of that legacy can be traced back to Robert Fuller's unforgettable performance as Jess Harper. Suddenly, Robert Fuller wasn't just famous in the United States, he was famous all over the world. Ram aired in more than 70 countries and won him a huge following. The show ran from 1959 to 1963, and right after, Fuller was cast in another legendary Western, Wagon Train, where he played Chief Scout Cooper Smith until 1965, when it ended. In a 2016 interview, Robert Fuller talked about how Laram regained popularity after it started airing on Encore Westerns. For many fans, it was the first time they had seen the show on TV since its original run, since it hadn't been widely syndicated over the years. Fuller remembered how the show's return sparked an overwhelming response, with thousands of emails and social media messages flooding in. Fans were thrilled to finally be able to watch Laram again, and many reached out to share their excitement. When talking about the show, Fuller said, "Laram had a good message and was a good Western with good characters, direction, and camera work." He also praised the talent behind the scenes, especially Ray Renahan, who was the show's director of photography. Renahan was an Oscar-winning cinematographer and a pioneer of Technicolor technology, which helped make Laram's visuals stand out. Fuller also praised the show's top directors, such as Joseph Ka and Leslie Slander. They both had a lot of experience with Westerns and helped make the show more realistic and well-told. Robert Fuller loved a good Western series. For Fuller, Westerns were his true passion. He built a strong reputation with his roles in iconic Westerns like Wagon Train and Laram. It was easy to see why he felt so comfortable in a cowboy hat and liked the way Westerns told stories, which also had a special place in the hearts of viewers. "If I can, I'll act in Westerns," Fuller told the World News. Westerns make good stories, great entertainment, and an escape for the viewer. The genre will always come and go in cycles on television. Fuller also said in a separate interview with the Associated Press, "I like working outdoors, and I like the people I work with." Fans quickly came to love Fuller's roles in these shows. Some characters, like Cooper Smith from Wagon Train, treated Fuller like he was a friend. "I like how people react to me too. When I go on tours, people recognize me right away and talk to me like I'm an old friend. They say things like, 'The next bad guy you meet, kill him for me. It will make you feel like $1 million.'" Even though he'd appeared in plenty of Westerns, Fuller was always ready to saddle up for one more. When asked what kind of project he'd like to tackle next, he didn't hesitate. Another Western series, Fuller replied. Did Robert Fuller and John Smith get along? Robert Fuller and John Smith brought a unique part of Wyoming to life, giving fans a view that not many other shows could match. The two stars got along great, with Fuller saying, "We couldn't have worked as long and as hard together as we did." They were so close that Fuller joked about how much he hated having to shout across the dressing room walls to talk to Smith. Eventually, the cast, in their usual quirky way, punched holes in the walls themselves. It was just one of the crazy things they did after Laram's huge success. Fuller then went on to play Cooper Smith in 60 episodes of Wagon Train. He also had smaller roles in movies and appeared on TV with big names like Bob Hope, Robert Pine, and Carroll O'Connor. But Fuller was still. Jack Webb eventually convinced him to join the cast of Emergency, which wasn't the type of role he would have chosen on his own. He got along well with his co-stars, but the call of the Western Trails was always in the back of his mind. Fuller's car and Dan Durrier. In a 2016 interview, Robert Fuller talked about some great advice he got from the legendary actor Dan Durrier. Fuller, who was still new to Hollywood at the time, had the chance to work with Durrier on early episodes of Laram not long after meeting Durrier. During lunch at Universal Studios, Fuller was struck by how friendly and gracious Dan was. Dan seemed to know every waitress by name and treated them all with such kindness, which made an impression on the young actor that would last. Dan wasn't jaded by his years of success and still had a down-to-earth charm. But the most valuable moment came when Dan leaned in and gave Fuller some advice about how to handle his newfound success. Dan told Fuller to be careful with his money, especially now that he was making a lot of it. Having a steady income from his first series, Dan told Robert not to give in to the urge to buy unnecessary things. Don't be like all these actors and run right out and buy a new car, Dan said. Robert, realizing the wisdom in Dan's words, agreed. But 3 days later, he found himself driving onto the lot in a brand new 1959 Thunderbird. It was his first new car, and he couldn't resist the urge to treat himself. As he drove up, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous about how Dan would react. When Robert Fuller joked that he couldn't help himself, Dan, the older actor, laughed and told him he couldn't blame him. It was, after all, a beautiful car western. In the 1960s and 1970s, westerns started to lose popularity, and Robert Fuller's career went through similar problems. He kept getting parts in movies like Return of the Seven, the sequel to the Magnificent Seven incident at Phantom Hill, and Mustang Country, where he co-starred with Joel McCrea. McCrea's last movie, The Hard Ride, came out in 1971. Emergency producer Jack Webb saw it and thought Fuller would be perfect for the part of Dr. Kelly Brackett. Webb was so persistent that even though Fuller turned down the part twice, he wouldn't give up until Fuller agreed. The show was a huge hit, running for 7 years and introducing Fuller to a whole new generation of fans. Even though he had found success with Emergency, Fuller still wanted to return to westerns in 1980. He was excited to be in the pilot for Jake's Way, but the show was never picked up, and no episodes were made. During the 1980s and 1990s, Fuller starred on more than 20 TV shows including The Love Boat, The Fall Guy, Murder, She Wrote, Matt Houston, Tour of Duty, and Diagnosis, Murder. One of his most memorable roles was as an Old West Town sheriff on Walker, Texas Ranger in 2001, along with Jess Harper's great-grandson Wade Harper. Robert Fuller retired after his role on Walker, Texas Ranger, happy to end his career on a Western, which had always been his dream role. Going back to his roots in his personal life, he briefly tried singing and performing at different events with Bill Aiken's rock band Los Natas during holiday celebrations in Whiskey Flats, California. During one appearance as the Grand Marshal at a Memorial Day parade, he took the stage and sang the 1950 song Caribbean, but later told the band that he only knew the first verse. In 1967, Fuller retired. In Munich, Germany, he recorded an album with mostly German songs, such as Einer Cowboy, Lonesome Cowboy, Adios Mexicana Good. By Mexican Girl, über all of After Deville, and sind wie Blumen girls are like flowers. Fuller married Patricia Lee Lyon on December 20, 1962, and the two had 3 children together. They got a divorce in 1984, and Lyon tragically died of cancer in 1994. By the 1990s, Fuller had mostly stopped acting. His last role was in 2001, when he married actress Jennifer Savage. For her role on NBC Saint Elsewhere on May 19, 2001, Fuller reunited with the remaining cast of Emergency at the Emergency Convention at the Burbank Airport Hilton in 1998, all but Julie London, who had a stroke in 1995 and was later diagnosed with lung cancer. Troop's husband Bobby Troop died just months after the reunion. During the event, Fuller and his co-stars shared memories and talked about their time together, saying that they had always gotten along well. Fuller honored his friend James Drury at the 2010 Festival of the West by giving Drury the Cowboy Spirit Award. He also paid tribute to their late co-star John Smith, talking about how close they were on and off screen during their time on Laram. Smith had been to the festival before his health got worse in 2004. Fuller and Jennifer moved from Los Angeles to a ranch in North Texas because his longtime friend and neighbor Alex Cord encouraged them to do so. Fuller and Cord had met in 1961 while filming. Robert Simpson Sr., Fuller's stepfather, died in 2009. He was still involved in the Western community, going to events like the Wild West Toy Show in 2010 and the Spirit of the Cowboy Western Festival in 2012, where he was surrounded by other Western stars for his 80th birthday in 2013. Fuller celebrated with his fans and his wife while on vacation on a ranch in Libby, Montana. He also joined his longtime friend and fishing partner James Best for Norman Lloyd's 100th birthday celebration in 2014. Just a few months before Best's death, Robert Fuller told his son not to hang out with actors. One of the best things about getting older is being able to pass on your wisdom to the next generation. And when you have a career as long and successful as Robert Fuller's in television, you've definitely picked up some useful tips. Fuller shared his knowledge with his son in an open letter that was later published by the Associated Press. In the letter, he gave his son some timeless advice. Someday you might want to make a living by acting but still get to spend a lot of time in nature. Fuller wrote, "If that's the case, here's some advice for you while you're still too young to argue, son. Don't hang out with actors." Fuller had worked with actors for years on shows like Wagon Train and Laram, and he respected their craft. But he warned against making acting your life's work, because you'll end up acting all day and talking about it all night. Fuller's big break came in westerns, so it's not surprising that he told his son to follow the same path if he wanted to become an actor. But it wasn't just about the roles, it was also about the people he would meet along the way. Do everything you can to stay in westerns, Fuller told his son. There's a good reason for this. You'll have more fun. You'll be working with stuntmen and wranglers, the kind of guys who jump into action when the sheriff calls for opposing people who think the method is just a fancy way to get on a horse. These guys know where the best quail are hiding and where the fish are biting, and if you don't act like an actor, they might even take you along Robert Fuller's net worth house and the quiet life on his Texas ranch. Robert Fuller has a lot of experience from his decades-long career in entertainment. At age 81, Fuller's net worth is estimated to be around $5 million. He makes most of his money from his work, and many of Fuller's riches come from the roles he played in the 1960s and 1970s, which continue to make him money through syndication and fan appreciation. In the early years of his career, Fuller's salary varied based on the roles he played. Example, during the peak of Laram and Wagon Train, he earned a respectable amount for a leading man at the time, with reports putting it at anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 per episode, which was a lot of money for the time. Fuller built a solid financial base through roles in movies and later work on Emergency. This was during a time when the Western genre was becoming less popular. These days, Robert Fuller lives a comfortable life away from the spotlight. He lives on a beautiful ranch in North Texas with his wife Jennifer Savage. This property is very different from the busy Hollywood scene Fuller used to live in. It is in a quiet part of Cook County and has many acres of land, giving Fuller plenty of room to enjoy his love of the outdoors. Inside, the house is decorated with a mix of Western-inspired items and personal mementos from his long career, creating a unique blend of nostalgia and comfort. With its wide views of the Texas countryside, the ranch gives Fuller the peace and privacy he values, and he often spends his days taking care of the land, enjoying nature, and living a quieter, more fulfilling life after decades in the spotlight. What do you think about Robert Fuller's life? What do you think about his choice to live a quiet life after becoming famous? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to like and follow for more videos. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.